Well, hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Kevin Hubb, Superintendent of Scott County Schools, and I'm excited to be here with you tonight for what we think is going to be 90 minutes of fun and excitement as we talk about the Scott County Schools reopening plan. I had the opportunity to do a virtual town hall with our staff earlier this afternoon, and I just can't say enough how excited I am to get a chance to have our students back in schools in person, and how confident I am that the plans we have in place are going to result in a safe reopening for our students and staff. Like we've done in the past, we've asked you to submit some questions. I've got several pages of questions here. We've got these questions categorized into groups. So really in no particular order, I'm just going to go ahead and ask the questions. I expect that this will probably last, we've got it booked till 7 o'clock tonight, and I think that that will give us plenty of time to go through some of these. Let's go ahead and start out first. A question is, what states are on the Scott County Schools travel advisory list? I think most people know that next week, starting October 5th, it's going to be fall break in Scott County, and that we are not going to be returning in person until Wednesday the 14th. We've kept fall break in the schedule for several reasons, but quite honestly, the biggest reason is we just knew people were going to travel. We know that a lot of families adhere to the guidance and the guidelines from the state officials and Governor Beshear this summer and decided to forego summer vacation, but they had made plans to travel this fall break. So what we have put in place is the Johns Hopkins University does publish a list of states that are on the travel ban, and they do so daily. But we think that's not necessarily going to be the most fair for families that choose to travel. So in Scott County Schools, what we're going to do is use a rolling 7-day average. And on Sunday, the 11th of October, before we come back for the 12th and 13th, which is going to be still virtual makeup days, we're going to publish those states that are going to be the travel ban that we are going to use to determine return for students and staff. We think that 7-day average, the 7-day rolling average, is going to be more fair. Here are a couple things that we want you to think about. Again, we can't be more clear that we're not trying to stop anybody from traveling. We're not trying to tell people where to travel. The states that are going to be on the travel ban, a couple of things are going to be in place. We're going to want you to get a negative test before you come back from those states and have 72 hours away from school. So if you think you and your family are going to be going to a state that may be on the list, right now the Carolinas and Florida and Georgia are not on the travel ban list. Who knows, by the end of the next fall break week, some schools in the nation are on fall break this week, some are next week, and many more after that. We don't know what's going to happen to these, but if you think you're going to travel to a state that's going to be on the travel ban, we suggest that you make an appointment for a test for your children in advance. If you go to a state and you come back next weekend and you find out that on Sunday the 11th that state that you travel to is not on the travel ban, then you can cancel that appointment. And we would encourage you to go ahead and cancel that appointment so that people who have traveled and didn't make an appointment would go ahead and do that. Again, those are going to be posted on our district website on Sunday the 11th of October. What about transportation? Where can we find bus schedules? I was told today that the info finder is located on our website, and the icon for the info finder is the school bus, just like it has been for every single year. In most cases, the bus routes and the specific bus numbers are going to be the same as they were last year. But as you can imagine, in this year especially, there's going to be more students with adjustments. There are going to be more families making late-minute decisions. So we're just going to ask you to give us that patience and tolerance and grace that we asked for so many times during our last town hall. Now's the appropriate time to ask you for that. So yes, it's going to be posted on our website. The info finder is what you're looking for. How will seating on buses work? It's not going to be the case that students are going to be socially distanced on a bus. It's not going to be the case that they're going to be socially distanced in our schools either. But hopefully you'll recall that that has really been our stance since May, when we first unveiled our thoughts about what reopening in schools in Scott County would look like. As students enter the bus, we're going to try to keep them as socially distanced as possible for as long as we can. Will buses be cleaned each day or between morning and afternoon routes? We're going to clean them before each of the routes, the morning routes and the afternoon routes. And for many of our buses, we're going to be able to have them cleaned even between the elementary and secondary morning routes and the elementary and secondary afternoon routes. Will bus drivers wear masks? Bus drivers, while in the act of driving the bus, will not be wearing a mask. That's a safety concern for everybody that's on that bus. Bus drivers will be wearing a mask when an entire bus load of children load or unload at a school. We've had some questions about a hybrid schedule because a lot of districts that are back in session are using a hybrid model. In Scott County Schools, we decided against the hybrid model from the very beginning. We decided against the hybrid model for two reasons. I think that what a hybrid model does is require double work for teachers, and I think the students in the end only get half of the instruction time. I'm afraid that if we had a Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday hybrid, that lessons would be taught to the Monday group and the same lessons would be taught to the Tuesday group, in essence, cutting the time in half. And if teachers are communicating with the students they have in person, knowing our teachers and how important they believe communication is with students and their families, they're also going to be communicating that night with those that are on virtual. And they would be doing the same thing when we come back to school on Tuesday. So in Scott County Schools, we do not have a district-wide hybrid plan. But what we do offer is the opportunity for, in limited cases, families that may have an instance where they can only get childcare one day a week. They really don't want their children to go to school, but they're going to be in person Monday through Thursday, and then maybe Friday they'll keep them at home. It probably wouldn't necessitate a switch from home in person to virtual, but yet students would still be able to keep up and get the work, because in most of our cases, what they're doing in person, that work is still going to be categorized and located in a Google Classroom format. Is there any way for a student to come in person only for certain classes? Yes, that is the case. I think one of the examples that I gave in the last town hall is for several of our students who are enrolled at the Elkhorn Crossing School. Many of those students, matter of fact, in our most recent survey, I think more than 90% of those students are choosing to go in person for the part of the day where they're at Elkhorn Crossing School, and maybe for the other half of the day when they're either at Great Crossing or Scott County High School, they're choosing to go virtual. And that is an option that is available to those students. And I'm sure that you have communicated that with your teachers in schools already. And the other question is, can we choose to only send our children in person on certain days of the week? And yes, that's just the example that I just shared. Hopefully what you're recognizing as a community, that what's been the foundation of our plan has been that we keep that we kept the flexibility for our families at the forefront. We know you have enough stressors at home because we're in the pandemic. You've got health issues, maybe with those in your immediate family, your extended family. We know that there are economic issues with economic shutdown and layoffs. So the thing that we thought we could do is provide as much flexibility as we can. So there's very few places on our plan where we have put up artificial barriers that's going to make a difference for a family. The next category is cleaning. What precautions are being set in place to ensure a sanitized school for my kids every single day? For weeks, we've been distributing cleaning materials, sanitizing materials, personal protective equipment to our schools. We've got a system in each of our schools where they can continue to order, and we have continuous orders in place to make sure that the cleaning supplies and the sanitizing supplies that we use get replenished, and we're going to continue to do that. Generally, our plans include that we're going to clean the bathrooms at least 4 times a day, and that we're going to clean high-touch areas at least 1 time every hour. When you think about high touch areas, I think this is the point where I need to remind everybody again that our interior classroom doors in Scott County are going to remain open. And that contradicts what's happened in the past based on the guidance from the Safe School folks. But we believe for two reasons: for the health and safety of our students, it's best that we leave those doors open. If we leave the doors open, we're going to eliminate each of those doorknobs being high touch areas that are being touched by every student coming in the door and exiting the door. We also believe that by opening our doors, we're going to have a better opportunity for our ventilation systems to work and keep that air in each of our school buildings of a higher quality and a more safe quality. We are not concerned that that decision diminishes our protection and our safety for our students and staff, because remember, exterior doors remain locked, and in each of our schools we have a security vestibule and a secure entrance at the front, and we think that is going to continue to maintain our safe school environments. One question about staff is, will our staff be required to take a vaccine when it becomes available? Certainly, there's nothing I can do that would require anyone of our staff members to take a vaccine, so that would be no. Social distancing. Something else that has been consistent throughout our reopening plan in Scott County is that early on, we said, we didn't try to rearrange our desks. We didn't try to take tape measures and measure the square footage in our classrooms, because we knew, since the hybrid model wasn't going to make sense for us, in our opinion, that we weren't going to be socially distant. So what we said is that everybody needed to wear a mask the entire day, including students and staff, unless you're going to be eating or drinking, or if you're outside actively engaged in recess. So how can you possibly keep teachers and students safe in that small? We're sure that we can keep them safe. There's been enough documentation and guidance on masks that if everybody is wearing masks, even when you're not socially distanced, that you're still going to be safe. And our plan has been approved by our local health department. We've got some questions about the school day. Will students be going to different rooms for classes, or will they stay in one room and have the teachers move? That's going to vary by school and grade. You might think that common sense would prevail and we would have students not move and only teachers would move. But it's not what's best for kids. It's not best for children that they sit in the same seat for 6 hours of instruction each day. It also doesn't really make sense in a practical matter when you think about the instructional resources that teachers have at their disposal in each classroom. So more often than not, I think you're going to find, especially in our secondary schools, that students are going to move. In our elementary schools, it's a little bit different. What are the start and end times for the school day? There's been no change. Are there going to be efforts to reduce the number of students switching classes at the same time at middle and high schools? There are a couple things that we're going to do to mitigate everybody being out there at once. We've got some staggered transition times, and in our secondary schools, many have opted to have one-way hallways. Are kids going to be allowed to participate in specials or elective classes? Yes, that's going to be the case. And now's probably the time when we're talking about specials. Students in chorus, even while masked, will not be permitted to sing. That's part of the guidelines that has recently come out with the reopening of schools. It's also important to know that when students are in their physical education class, their PE class, that they will also be wearing masks. And you might think, well, isn't there a lot of guidance out there about if you're doing some physical activity that you don't need to wear a mask? Certainly that guidance is out there, but we're even seeing our high school student athletes choosing to wear masks while they compete because they want to keep each other safe. And if high school students in competition can wear masks, we think that for the safety of students and staff, asking our students during a PE class to wear masks is not an undue burden. Is there going to be recess? Yes, there is going to be recess. Are we going to require students to wear masks at recess? We think that's best practice, but they're not going to be required to wear masks. We're going to have teachers that are going to be cleaning the fixed recess equipment between classes. In some of our larger playground areas, we've assigned certain classes, certain parts of the playground so that it's easier to maintain contact tracing. But one of the things that we're going to eliminate is a multi-touch piece of equipment. So we're not going to see students throwing football or frisbee, for example, because we're not going to be able to clean those between one student touching them and another student touching them. We have a couple of calendar questions. When will the fall 2020 school year end, regardless of what format we're in? The last student day of instruction is going to be Friday, the 18th of December. And the second question is, will any changes be made to the calendar for the rest of the year? I would say possibly. I don't want to assume, but I think an additional add-on question might be, well, when are you going to set the graduation dates? Normally we try to set those we try to set those when we do our calendar, which we're scheduling for the December 3rd, I think, regularly scheduled board meeting. Yeah, December 3rd, regularly scheduled board meeting. We may try to estimate when we think graduation is going to be, but I don't imagine many of us would think that graduation is going to happen in mass like it happened before the pandemic. I don't know if we're going to use the same formats for graduation for the class of 2021 as we did for the class of 2020, but I certainly don't think that the class of 2021 is going to look anything like the class of 2019. We've got some food service questions. Will lunch be free inside the school or only for virtual learners? We've gotten an extension of the summer feed program through the 31st of December. So that means everyone is going to eat free. I will tell you that we did get a last minute update that the United States Senate has passed and that President Trump has signed an extension for this bill through the end of the school year, but we've not gotten official notification of the Kentucky Department of Education. So what I know to be true for sure is that through December 31st, no children 18 and under will have to pay for their meals. Let me go ahead and talk a little bit about the specifics of how we're going to take care of distributing food for those families that are not in person. Beginning on October 14th, we will be serving students who are in person and those who are virtual. Virtual learning students should pick up meals at the same school where they've been picking meals up to this point. You can only pick up meals at one location. However, the pickup will only be on Wednesdays. Families will pick a meal box up for each child that's going to have 5 breakfasts and 5 lunches, and the pickup times are going to be between 9:30 and 10:30. And these meals are free for aged 18 and under. And you might think, why is this process so restricted? Well, what I would ask you to think about is that all of the added bonuses that we've been able to do so far, multiple pickup locations, multiple delivery options, those benefits and bonuses occurred when we did not have children in school. What I hope that you'll think is that our food service staff is going above and beyond, not only preparing meals for the students that are in person, but simultaneously preparing these meals on Wednesdays so that those students can have breakfasts and lunches for them while they're virtual learning. Will the kids be able to eat in the cafeteria? Yes, they'll be able to eat in the cafeteria, but some of our schools also have alternative locations set up. There are a couple of reasons tonight why I want to highlight the great partnership that we have with Toyota. One of the things that they're helping provide us with is some plexiglass partitions that in some cases are going to double the number of children that can sit at a table and still be protected while not be socially distanced while they don't have a mask. So some children are going to be eating in bleachers. Some children are going to be eating in the cafeteria. Some are going to be eating in the hallway. And we might even have some instances where teachers and principals think it's best for those students to eat in the classroom. Again, the health and safety of our students and staff is going to be what's coming first. Here's an interesting question. I can only imagine it comes from a parent who's responsible for concessions. How much is a case of Coke? Certainly parents are able to buy that Coke from Walmart or Kroger, but if we have to give you that Coke, we have to go off the state bid price contract, and that currently is $6.50. And I can't imagine, I never expected that question for sure. What about supplies? Will my child still need to bring school supplies that are on the list that's typically done at the beginning of the school year? We have asked schools to the extent possible to minimize the requests that they're making for school supply lists. I also want to thank all the community partners that have done so much in the way of making sure that our teachers and our schools have supplies so that parents don't have to take that undue burden. And if you're not sure about what the latest decision has been for your child's classroom, I'd suggest that you reach out to your classroom teacher and ask those questions. So there's a question on communication, and it asks, will we be using other forms of communication besides Facebook to get out our information? What I'm proud to say is that when we interviewed our parents early, well, maybe not early in the spring, early in the summer, to see how well we had done in the spring, over 90% of those parents who responded said that the methods by which we used to communicate they thought were effective. And we don't just use Facebook. We use Facebook, we use email, we use text messages, we use voice messages, we use our websites. So there's lots of different ways that we communicate, and there's always going to be plenty of places where you can find out the information that you need. Here's a question about sports. Some of our sports are going on right now. How are we reporting infections and quarantines for students and staff? I couldn't be more proud of our athletic directors and our coaches, and quite honestly, our players too, because they are doing the right things that's keeping them away from quarantine and being able to compete as student athletes. I would tell you that at one time we had as many as 5 teams that were quarantined, and those decisions are really pretty easy for us once we figure out contact tracing and once we figure out who is positive or who is symptomatic or who has done testing. What you might not be aware of is that the decision that I have made is that we will not be playing teams in counties that are red. Currently, Fayette County is red, which means that if we were to have a soccer game tonight against Henry Clay, we would not play Henry Clay tonight because they're county in red, nor would we let them come to us. My rationale for making that decision is really pretty simple. My decision to keep them from going to a red county means that they lose the opportunity to play in that single game. If I let them go to a red county and one of their teammates or a player from the other team tests positive and it results in a 2-week quarantine, that's 2 weeks of opportunities that they miss out on. Maybe they're going to miss out on a senior night. Maybe they're going to miss out on some other special event that was scheduled during that 2-week time. So I'm hoping the trade-off of 1 game versus 2 weeks is going to pay off. And I appreciate the support that we've gotten from our student athlete parents already. And again, I can't say enough how much credit to give our student athletes. You know, many of those student athletes, I'm hearing anecdotally, are making the decision to move from in-person to virtual just so that they can stay more safe. They think that's going to be a safer method as we move into the end of their sports seasons. But I will tell you anecdotally, many of you know that Warren County Schools, which is a district about 1.5 times our size, they have been open, and Warren County has been a red county for many of those weeks. The last time I talked to Superintendent Clayton, more of his positive cases were from his virtual students than were from his in-person students. Will we go to school on Fridays? Yes, we will go to school on Fridays. How long can a student be home before it's considered truancy if they've been exposed to COVID-19? So it's not going to be considered truancy. I'm going to talk in a few minutes about the decision matrix and how many days it's going to suggest that that you stay away from school. Of course, an option is for that in-person student to switch to the virtual option. Of course, what's not going to be accepted is that a student would have a 14-day quarantine and decide to take 2 more weeks off because they don't feel like going to school. But it is possible that somebody might have done a 14-day quarantine. They might have gotten a negative test, but they still feel symptomatic. I'm told that we have an employee or two that have really struggled with symptoms most of the summer, even though they keep getting negative tests. So, parent notes are going to help us keep track of these instances, but there's not going to be a limit on parent notes this year like there usually is. Will all students who elected in-person instruction go back at the same time through Monday through Friday? And that answer is yes. And also, will the length of the school day be the same? And that's yes. Let me talk next about some specific questions regarding masks. I think it's important to know right off the front that really there's only been a few changes, but we have always said that students and staff in Scott County Schools, based on our reopening plan, are not going to be socially distanced. You shouldn't expect that your child is going to be socially distanced. That, quite honestly, when the new and the most recent not decision matrix, but the most recent set of guidelines for masks came out, there really wasn't much of a difference that we had to face in Scott County, because we had been telling everybody all along to expect to wear masks, don't expect to be socially distanced in the classroom. One of the changes that we did make was the requirement for kindergarten students to wear masks. Again, in Scott County, we are requiring kindergarten students to wear masks. That is a decision that we're making. We are making it above and beyond the guidelines for Healthy at School. We are making that decision not to punish kindergarten students, of course, but it's to protect everybody in that building. If kindergarten students are not wearing masks, every time they go to the bathroom, they go to the hall to get a drink of water, they go to the hall to move to a special class, they go out to go to the cafeteria, that's further exposure to students and staff in the building that are wearing masks that would necessitate broader quarantines than we think are needed. So we are going to ask and require that kindergarten students wear masks. Will students be allowed to keep masks off while sitting at their desks and only mask when moving, as the original guideline stated? No, students are going to be wearing masks at all times indoors, except when they're eating or drinking. And that is based on the latest set of guidelines that the Department of Public Health and the Kentucky Department of Education have shared with us. So that is a change. When you're indoors, you're going to be wearing a mask. What about children who are not wearing masks? And this is generating lots of discussion. But if you remember, the premise of our entire reopening plan is built on student and staff safety. If a student is in school and they're not wearing a mask, we need to put them in an isolation room separate from others who are wearing a mask. This applies to both sets of students. Students who are choosing not to wear a mask, and students who are not wearing a mask because they have a medical exemption. From the reports I'm getting from superintendents that have already had classes started in person, the students who are choosing not to wear masks are very minimal. Teachers are able to have conversations with those students. They're able to provide them masks so that they can wear. And I'm just asking parents that if you'll just embrace the data, and adhere to our guidelines and send your children to school with masks. I think that's going to help everybody stay safe. There's also a question about what types of masks are okay, and specifically, what about neck gaiters? The guidance says a couple things. The masks that have the little $half sized vent or filter, those are not the best face covering that a child should have. We've got additional masks. If that's the only mask that you and your family have, we won't take that mask away. We'll just ask the child to wear a mask that we give. I was just notified within the last hour, we've got over 14,000 cloth masks as our kind of portion of the masks that we're getting from the state. Neck gaiters. Neck gaiters are proven to be very popular. And if a neck gaiter is the type of face covering that you are able to have your child put on, maybe they just won't wear a mask, a neck gaiter is going to be fine. They are most protective when they are 2-ply. There are 2-ply neck gaiters out there, but most of those are single-ply, really with just a single fold before you put the neck gaiter on. A child will be able to have a 2-ply neck gaiter. So I also want to make it clear that there are going to be 2 sets of isolation rooms. There's the children not wearing a mask isolation room, but there's also the health isolation room. Let's just say a student gets off the bus and they're symptomatic or they have a fever. We're going to get them with the nurse and put them with an isolation room. The question was, are parents going to be called? In both cases, parents will be called so that you can have the option to pick up your child once you know that they have been placed in an isolation room. Will the students who have a documented medical exemption be given their lessons in the same room as the children who are simply unwilling to wear their masks? The answer to that is yes. And it's not that we're trying to discriminate. It's not that we're trying to punish. It's just that the quarantine rules are dictating our decisions to help keep students and staff safe. Will staff members be wearing masks at all time? That was another one of the changes that I was able to clarify at a recent board meeting. But yes, staff members will be required to wear masks at all times. There's one question on technology. Why is the school asking if my child will be bringing their personal device to school? I think this issue was more of an issue if we had started in person first. The reason why we're asking that to happen is because we think that we having the opportunity to train a child how to use Google Classroom or how to navigate through some of the instructional resource sites that we're using, if they can learn how to do that on their personal device, if and when we go back to virtual, we think that they will be more comfortable. We think that they will be better learners. And quite honestly, we think it will be easier for you as parents because you won't be answering so many technical questions. We can get straight to the part of student learning and student achievement. Let's talk a little bit about virtual learning. Can classes be live from school each day and the kids at home have the paperwork needed for that day? I think the easiest way to explain how we're doing our virtual learning is, again, we've made sure that there's flexibilities for families. We are providing both synchronous opportunities and asynchronous opportunity. A synchronous opportunity is pretty simple. It says that if my English class starts at 10 o'clock, as a student, I can log on at 10 o'clock. And just like you are seeing, for those of you viewing right now at 6:04 on Thursday night, you are seeing this live. And that is a synchronous version. We are in synchronicity. We're teaching and talking and conversation back and forth. We think that's best, and we think that's a good option, especially for those parents who think that a rigid schedule is the best for their child and is the best way for their child to learn. But what we also know is that there are going to be circumstances where children are going to be at home and maybe they have other responsibilities at home. Maybe they're helping as a caregiver for a grandmother or grandfather, or maybe they're helping with a toddler brother or sister. Well, if you're helping with a toddler brother or sister, because that's what your family needs you to do, you're probably not going to be able to focus on middle school science. So what is also available is that students can learn in an asynchronous format, meaning that we're not going to require them to be on at 10 o'clock. They can be on a little bit later. Now, what might happen, because again, what undergirds this whole thing is we are having our virtual teachers be virtual teachers and our in-person teachers be in-person teachers, because we don't think it's fair nor effective to ask them to do double work. So if you are learning in the asynchronous format and you and your husband get home from work and after supper, you want to start the evening teaching with your children and it's 7 o'clock and you have some questions, I know it's going to be inconvenient, but certainly send that teacher an email, but it may be the next day during their planning period when they're able to answer that email. So depending on the questions that you have and the roadblocks that you might have to certain instruction resources, you may find yourself a day behind as the rest of the classes progress. But again, we think that is a small trade-off for the option that doesn't mandate that your child be present at specific times during the day. If I decide to let my child do in-person learning, do I have the opportunity to switch to virtual learning later? Yes, you do. In Scott County, there aren't specific gates that you have to meet. You don't have to be at the end of the grading period. You don't have to be at the end of the semester. Again, we don't want you going back and forth and back and forth. We don't think that's best for students, but we understand that there are going to be issues that families are going to decide that it's best for a student to go from virtual to in-person and from in-person back to virtual. Will Scott County be providing Chromebooks for kids to be able to stay at home? Like we said before, when you look at our portable devices, our Chromebooks, our iPads, or laptops, and when you look at our desktop computers that we have enough devices that we think the families that need them were able to get them. And I think that was mostly solved by the beginning of September when we first started in class. This is the second time tonight when I want to make sure I thank our great partner, Toyota, because based on a recent grant that we got, we've been able to purchase more than 400 new Chromebooks, and they are on order, and they're not back ordered. I don't know when we're going to get them in, but they're going to be shipped, and that gives us more than 7,000 Chromebooks. I also, at this point, really want to thank our families, because the reports that I get back from principals are that families who took advantage of loaner technology equipment when we made the switch from in-person to all virtual beginning, we wanted to be able to give you that loaner. We knew that you needed that loaner, and we appreciate so much that you understand that we needed those loaners back, because when we're in person, those computers are going to be necessary to teach our in-person kids. And again, the reports that I'm getting from principal is that you as a community were appreciative of the loaner device in the first place, and are also understanding of the fact that we need it back when we go in person. It's a little bit different for the students who were initially virtual and remaining virtual. If we loan those devices out, in most cases, you're going to be able to keep those devices. Why not just continue this semester in virtual format and plan to go back in person in January? There's no doubt in my mind, there's no doubt in the minds of my staff and of my principals and my district team that in-person learning is best for students. Students are going to learn best, they're going to learn most when they're in a classroom in front of a certified and qualified teacher. That's what's best. We also know that not all of our students come from the very best home environments. And for those students, we gladly want to have them with us for as long as we can. We provide wraparound services, we provide counseling services, health and nutrition services, nursing services, all of these wraparound services that really benefit our children, and we do those best when we're in person. And for those reasons, we are going back in person because we're confident that our plan is going to allow us to do it safely. How are students supposed to know which teachers they have? Most of you are aware because you got a request from your teacher last week asking one more time if you have an updated decision regarding in-person or virtual. We had about 10% of our students district-wide change. We were running 63 or 64% when we'd planned to start in person on August 26th. It looks like we're up to about 73% as a district. We got some places that are higher and some places that are a little bit lower, but 73% of you want to send your students back in person. So with that 10%, we are going to have a few master schedule changes and a few teacher changes. But again, the advantage of starting that Wednesday after fall break gives our staff time to enjoy fall break. I mean, I don't want to, on the one hand, say, go have fall break, and on the other hand, say, well, we're going to start on Monday, so spend half your fall break thinking about how a master schedule is going to change and which class roster you're going to have. So we're going to use Monday and Tuesday to allow our staff to effectively transition from all virtual to a combination of in-person and virtual. If my child wants to go in person later in the year because they're virtual now, what's the process? Contact your child's school. But again, that's something that won't be prohibited in Scott County. Let me talk next about preschool. I guess it was earlier this week when we made the decision that Scott County Preschool will remain all virtual through the end of this semester. Scott County Preschool will not go back in person any sooner than January 1st. Preschool students, because of choking and strangulation hazards, are not going to be wearing masks. And because of that, for the safety of those students and for the safety of our staff, we decided that they would remain all virtual. We're able to do that in Scott County because our preschool has a separate building. They have a separate transportation route and separate bus drivers. So we were able to do that. And that doesn't mean that those families are not going to be provided services. One of the options that the state has given us in times when we remain virtual is we can have up to 15% of the student capacity of that building in the building at one time for a 2-hour block. And we can do that twice a day. So we can have a 2-hour block in the morning and we can have a 2-hour block in the afternoon. That 2-hour block in the morning and the 2-hour block in the afternoon, we're going to utilize that. We're going to utilize those times. We're going to contact our families, and we're going to give some services to our preschool students and their families that are going to do the best we can to help them progress through what would be the first semester of their preschool year. We got a question that says, well, if local daycares are open, then why can't we open our preschools? Well, most of our local daycares don't have the population of medically fragile children, autistic children, children that have toileting and other medical needs. So it's easier for them to handle students when they are in that setting. When you add these extra health and hygiene issues that our students need, it makes it more difficult to help pay attention and to sanitize and to clean and to watch over the other students in the classroom. If you're a parent of a 3-year-old, 3 or 4-year-old, if you're a grandparent or a caregiver of a 3 or 4-year-old, bless their hearts, you know they love nothing more than to stick their fingers in their mouth, regardless of what was the last thing they touched. And when you think about that, it's just not a safe environment. We know the services that we deliver to preschool are critical. We think that we can deliver these services best and most safely in these 2-hour windows that we're going to have each day when we control the number of kids and the specific kids that are coming in, we're going to be able to do that. So we're confident that our decision is going to result in preschool services being delivered to children while also keeping students and staff safe. What I want to get into next, and this will be not that the first 45 minutes haven't been dry as toast, but this will be drier. We have a decision matrix. You've heard us talk about a decision matrix. I want to make sure that you do see that we have a decision matrix. I'm going to read this to you. I'm going to read it to you because it's going to help answer several of our questions. I'm going to read it to you so that you know we have one, but it is going to be posted by the end of today, tomorrow, on our district website. The most important thing I can do is to have you heed this caution. The decision tree that I'm going to read from today is dated the 23rd of September. The last time I was in front of principals, I talked to them about a different decision tree that was dated at a different date in September. By the time we get back to school after fall break, it's entirely possible a new decision tree will happen. I know you've heard, I know for sure, decisions about what is safe, what is practical, what is best practice, what is a requirement, what is a guideline, changes on a daily basis. So I'll read through these quickly, but not so quickly that you can't understand it. But remember, it's not necessary to take notes. We're going to post this document online for you. There are 7 scenarios, and with each scenario, we're going to talk about the mandatory absence and what it takes to return to school. The first scenario is when a student or staff member that has a fever or multiple symptoms, and it's the first time that happens. The absence is that it is the rest of the current day and at least 2 calendar days that follow, and a PCR COVID test is recommended. When can they return to school? After the mandatory absence is served and there have been symptom-free for 24 hours. The second scenario is what happens when a student or staff member has symptoms or a fever, but it's the second occurrence. This time it's an excused absence for 10 calendar days or a negative test, which will take away the 10-day absence requirement. When can they return to school? If the person has been symptom-free for 24 hours and they either have a negative test or they have served the 10-day absence requirement. What about a student or a staff who test positive? It's an excused absence for 10 calendar days from either the date the test was taken for asymptomatic or the date of the first set of symptoms for those with symptoms. The negative test result in this case does not lift the 10-day absence requirement. When can they return to school? After the mandatory absence is served and they've been symptom-free for 24 hours. A negative test is not required. What about the travel ban? And again, remember, Scott County is going to do a rolling 7-day average for the travel ban states. We're going to post that on our district website, and I'm sure we're going to communicate it somehow. That will be there October the 11th. The excused absence for 14 calendar days, or if you have a negative result from a PCR test taken 72 hours after exiting the state on the list. That negative test will take away the 14 days, but you need the 72 hours. When can you come back after the mandatory timeout or the negative test? Three more scenarios. A student or a staff member has contact with a positive household member. There's a district-ordered quarantine, and we're going to look at contact tracing to see for how long. This is another one. When can they return to school? Depending on the duration and the proximity of the person in the household, the Department of Public Health will let us know. What about a student or staff has come in contact with a non-household member who's positive? Contact tracing is going to be completed. We're going to determine the exposure level, and it may result in the quarantine. And again, when can you return to school? That's going to be directed by the Department of Public Health, depending on the duration of time spent and the proximity. And lastly, this is, we call it kind of a contact of a contact. A staff or student contact with someone who has been quarantined due to exposure of somebody else. Unless the quarantine person tests positive, a contact of a contact is cleared to come to school. It would be recommended that the contact demonstrate the highest levels of healthy habits. When can they return to school? Immediately. I think this last part is going to be what's likely to take place in our classrooms. Because students are going to be masked all the time, if a student in a classroom tests positive, the likelihood remains minimal that that entire class would need to quarantine. Based on seating charts, based on what happened during that school day, the Department of Public Health, along with our help, will determine how many students were at risk. Now, there's a question about notification. There's going to be two ways that we're going to notify everybody about a couple things. The state dashboard that we're going to update every single day asks us to give two numbers for every single school in the district. The number of new staff and student positive cases and the number of new staff and student quarantines. Again, it's reported by every school for Scott County to the state COVID-19 website. Additionally, classroom communication will go out, and it will be some version of, there was a student in your child's classroom today that has been identified positive based on contact tracing and seating charts. Your child is not quarantined, but we wanted you to be informed. Or contact tracing is going to say that based on the duration and the proximity of your child to the student who tested positive, there will be a quarantine issue, and then we follow back on those rules. I can only imagine how hard it is for everybody to understand. You know, I know how many different rules and regulations and scenarios that we're having to deal with all the time. Once we get into this and it starts applying to you and your family and you and your child, then I'm confident that what's going to happen is the level of trust that we have in the community, which I hope is already pretty high, is going to remain there, because you're going to see that we're transparent and you're going to see that our plan is going to work. Now, remember, we have not been in school since March. So the typical lunch hiccups, the typical bus route hiccups, the typical drop off and pickup hiccups are going to be the same as they typically are when we start school again. So for the second, and I hope last time tonight, I'm going to ask you for some patience and tolerance and grace, especially that Wednesday, Thursday, Friday when we're first back in school. There's some question about the new state metric that lists counties as green, yellow, orange, and red. That's another example of something that changes all the time. The example that the Department of Public Health and the guidelines that they gave us last Tuesday are entirely different than the guidelines they gave us this Tuesday. I'm not able to provide you a definitive answer right now based on what happens if Scott County is red on the 29th of October. There are too many varying factors. What I can promise you is this: the decision is going to be made in consultation with my Board of Education, because it's those board members that have the responsibility and have the pulse of the community members and their constituents that contact them all the time. So I'm not going to make that decision in absence of communication with them. They're going to help me form my opinion, as well as my opinion will be formed by my team. But more importantly, we're going to look at the guidance from our government officials and then from our local public health officials. It's entirely the scenario that we have an isolated incident at one of our elderly care centers, and the Department of Public Health may say, you guys have been in school for 3 weeks, and the rate of incidences in your school is such that we believe your plan is solid, and they're going to give us permission to continue to go to school. I want you to know that our preference is to remain in person for as long as we can remain in person. But I will also let you know that we believe the worst thing that we can do is to go back and forth in short periods of a week or 10 days, in person, all virtual, in person, all virtual. So it is possible that if we believe that's going to be the case, that we do make and set a time for a longer period of time than most of you would prefer, so that we say, this is what's going to happen for us all virtual. I shared towards the end of my virtual town hall last time to really have you thinking about February 1st. If we get awfully close to November, if we get awfully close to Thanksgiving, I know there's going to be family travel to and from Kentucky because of Thanksgiving. There's going to be family travel to and from Kentucky because of Christmas. And I don't want to be responsible for, certainly I don't want to be responsible for any really tragic events, but I also don't want to be responsible for families not being able to enjoy the family celebrations that occur around Thanksgiving and Christmas because of a spread of COVID, because we've been in school. I'm not saying that we're closing in November, and I'm not saying we're closing in December, but it's entirely possible that that becomes a reality. I think we've just got a few more questions. Will all students have to have a negative COVID test before returning to school? And that's no. We're not going to require our students, nor are we going to require our staff to have negative tests unless, of course, they've been exposed or they've been symptomatic. Will there be another survey about the ability to make a decision to switch from virtual and in person? Contact your teacher. It was the expectation that parents were contacted last week. I've gotten results from all the principals letting me know updated numbers. So if you've been missed, contact your teacher and let them know your preference if you think that you want to make a change, or if you think they aren't sure which method of the two that you would like to take. Will parents be required to sign anything releasing their rights from attending students in person? Absolutely not. Are elementary schools planning to provide before school care? No. At this time, we're not planning to provide before school care. We are going to be providing after school care, but it's important to note that those guidelines are also very restrictive, which is going to result in a reduced number of students in our after school program. I think that I may be given a few more late add questions, and then this will wrap us up. So the question is, for the students who are medically exempt from wearing a mask, will they be required to wear a mask into the building during the temperature check? No. The temperature check process is going to be such that there's not going to be the duration and the proximity that's going to be an issue. It might be asked that those children are going to be isolated and they're going to have their temperature checked separately. In most of our schools, what's going to happen is we are going to be doing temperature checks for our car rider lines while they're in the cars, so that if they do have a temperature greater than 100.3, that we will be sending them home with parents if they have a fever. Well, everybody, I hope that this has been beneficial. I hope that if you intend to take a fall break, that you enjoy fall break. And I hope that you're confident that we've got a reopening plan that's going to keep your children safe. Thank you and have a good night.